Holy Lucio Mafia. I've been gone for a bit, and I promise it has been for a bit of a good reason. The Swiss week was starting up, and I felt too lazy to make a video every week going over everything, so I decided to do something a bit more special. I wanted to make this entire video to catch you up on what happened during week 5 and the Swiss week, just as a quick video before playoffs. And before we get into it, I'd like to give a shout out to Corbs, who was the coach for OTW, Valerie, who is EM's flex support player, and Spongy Cheese, the hit scan bottom boy from Wisdom Academy, for helping me make opinions and basically just information going into these weeks, because I did not write down my initial thoughts. So where did our matches leave off from? Geo, Wisdom, and OTW had just won their matches, and now we're going straight into the week 5. When it comes to this week, our matches were Geo versus Wisdom, which Wisdom won 3-1. Keep this in mind for later on, it's kind of a bit of foreshadowing. EM versus Hyperflex, which EM won 3-2. Lastly, OTW versus SBC, which OTW wins 3-0 with one tie. In my opinion, I was watching the EM versus Hyperflex game because the debated top 3 team was almost crushed by the second worst team in the league. When I asked my helpers their opinions for the week of that game, they said, the fuck Hyperflex, too boring and expected outcomes, and one interesting game, a good week of games. Then I asked what was the best match of that week, and they said. Lastly, I asked if they could remember anything important, to which they said, Hyperflex looked competitive with EM, Wisdom versus Geo was close, and OTW rolled. Hyperflex playing Chef was super good, and they looked very polished. Wisdom went 5-0. Overall, that week was all Hyperflex, but this is still foreshadowing of things to come. When it came to the Swiss week, I don't understand why they called it that, don't ask me, I'm not a part of staff, not my issue. But the matches were Wisdom versus SBC, which Wisdom won 3-1. It's not very surprising, but it is sad they still lost the map. EM versus Hyperflex, which EM won 3-0. Lastly, Geo versus OTW, which Geo won 3-1. This week was more boring. When I asked my helpers, they said, expected might be one of the most boring weeks, just a regular day, unexpected. Which was expected, besides from Spongy being a bum. I then asked what was the best match of that week, and they said, NA, Geo versus OTW, because they were the ones with the most upset potential, and Geo versus OTW. Lastly, I asked what was the most important thing that they remembered from that week, and they said, pretty much predicted all the games right. Hyperflex was without Chef, and you could see the results and value Chef brings. It was a sloppy week for Wisdom, but Geo and EM seemed to be doing fine as normal. Now we got week 2 of Swiss week. And again, this was a very boring week, so I'll kind of skim over it a bit. The matches were Wisdom versus EM, which Wisdom won 3-0. Geo versus SBC, which Geo won 3-1. Lastly, OTW versus Hyperflex, which OTW won 3-0. It was a sleeper week. My helper said, expected as well. Wisdom being dominant, expected. Then, for the best games, they said NA, SBC versus Geo versus SBC. Lastly, for the most important thing that they remembered, they said NA, EM didn't have their starting main support, which could have contributed to their downfall. Pretty basic week though. Seemed that EM was falling out of the second seed while Geo was getting better. Now let's get into the real meat of the novice season. Swiss week 3. These matches were EM versus OTW, which EM won 3-1, so not very expected. But now we're going to go a bit out of the ordinary, because we had one of the rematches for the 2 worst teams, SBC and Hyperflex, which, as predicted, Hyperflex won 3-2. This was Chef_Zombie's first official win, so make sure you give him some love in the comment section down below. However, the most interesting game was definitely Wisdom versus Geo, which Geo won 3-2. Big shout out to the Geo. It's very insane, isn't it? Wisdom Golden Stage is now gone. They ended last season 10-0, and coming into this season, they could have finished it going 18-0. But now Gio said no, and honestly, what can you name better than Gio ruining someone's day? Wisdom technically ended the season now with a 17-1 loss record, and I wasn't expecting it. I'm definitely more surprised, but in a good way. When I asked my helpers for their opinions of this week, they said the Toilet Bowl and Super Bowl. Oh my god, Gio beat Wisdom. Unexpected. Then I asked for the best match, and they said Gio versus Wisdom, Hyperflex versus SBC, Gio versus Wisdom / SBC versus Hyperflex, Wisdom versus Gio. Which, is fair. Lastly, the important things that they could remember was Gio takes the top spot, OTW looks competitive against EM while memeing, and SBC versus Hyperflex was one of the greatest games of all time. Gio looks hella scary on ball. Tracer, Echo comps. Meta shifts really must have hurt them. Wisdom lost their first game, GG go next. In my opinion, Gio deserves this win way more than Wisdom could have ever done. Wisdom didn't look clean, so they genuinely don't deserve it. If they're not going to continually play at their best, then it really doesn't matter if they lose. In either way, it's kind of in the scenario of the NYXL, where they sandbagged to playoffs and then lost, which happened last season, so let's not hope for a redo. But going back into what I was talking about, I've never felt more proud of the team in purple, as well as for Hyperflex for finally winning their first game since week 1. But Pepe hands for SBC. They are the new Rio, ending with 0 wins, 8 losses, and negative 19 map score. Actually, they're kind of worse than Rio. Rio at least won maps, and I think eventually won a game, but I could be wrong from remembering. Actually, they didn't. I'm kind of just being hopeful. That's your catch-up for the week that we missed. But now we got playoffs. Every team is eligible, so both SBC and Hyperflex have a chance to redeem themselves. For what we know now, the first 2 matches are going to be SBC versus EM and OTW versus Hyperflex. For each match, my money is on EM 3-0 and Hyperflex 3-1. My reasoning is because SBC is complete dog, and I'll give my full opinions when their season ends, and I have to do a full video basically summarizing how I felt throughout them and what they went through the entire season. Is that me slacking on SBC? 100%, but I feel like they have not given anyone a reason to trust in their team. Yet, when it comes to Hyperflex, it would be wrong to say that I'm not being a tiny bit biased with my experience with players on the team and my Season 2 joining of them. I don't think OTW is just going to look good enough, and Hyperflex is coming off of a win from their last week. They're most likely going to be hyper-energized and really wanting to show that, yeah, they had a bad season, but they were a good team. I'm going to be cheering for the underdogs. Normally I would cheer for OTW, but since week 1, they haven't been showing me anything out of the ordinary or things that I should be proud of. We all know that I've been very supportive of them, so unfortunately around this time, I'm going to have to let OTW go. Now that's about it for the video. I thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the rest of the season of League Zero. We're not done yet, but I'm still grateful for anyone who has kept up to date with this series. Some more interesting content will be made even after the playoffs, when it comes over recapping each of the teams, the season, and whether or not you should join League Zero when it comes to Season 4. So, my name is Intel, and I thank you for watching.